Hello, my name is Amanda Grover, and I'm the Tax Program Coordinator for VITA Services for West Michigan with Goodwill Industries of West Michigan. And today we're going to jump into some information and instruction on how to use our TaxWise software. So TaxWise is the software that we have to use when we're preparing our VITA free tax returns. And what I had prepared is the Berringer. So there should be a supplemental document that you print out. It's next to the module, so you'll want to print out the information for Berringer. I have paginated numbered pages ready. So it's really a lot easier if you know exactly what I'm looking at and referring to. So please make sure you print this out prior to getting into the software and listening to this module. So I have the Berringer return, and I have to get into the software. I've got the printout, the supplemental materials, so I know how to prepare the return. It's pages 7 through 14. So as you watch the modules and as you get ready to practice and look at the tax software, contact me, Amanda Grover, and I'll get you all the login information. The instruction for how to log into the software is in our supplemental material on our training page, but I'm going to go through the whole process right here in front of you. So we're starting with Cheryl Berringer. It's a very basic tax return that we're preparing because I want to go kind of slow and show you how the software works, show you a few of the quirks about it, and get through a whole return. While we do practice and while the training is set up to segment state and federal tax returns, I wanted to prepare a whole return in the software for you to see. So I do have the state information on page 14 of your supplemental document. So I'm going to log into the TaxWise software. It's a secured website. Everything we do is online, which is nice because it's easily accessible. Everything is e-filed. It ends up working out pretty well. So I'm going to put in the client ID. I'll prepare all this information for you so that you can log in. This is the home page at TaxWise. This is where you arrive when you first log in. You can always have access to the returns that you've prepared over here in this tree. So you've got, if you want to check on some of your returns, you'll just select all returns. But we're going to just jump in and start this Cheryl Berringer's tax return. So before we start the return, if Cheryl were in front of you, you would first look at page 7 and 8 so you can get a good idea as far as what's going on with her intake and interview form. And make sure that she has all of her tax documents. So we want to make sure and double check for those Social Security cards that are on page 9. And you'll first want to go through the interview notes as you go through the practice returns that you have set up. The one thing I do want to mention is that while this information is provided to you in the practice, what you'll want to do is if there were a real person in front of you is you'd want to ask some of these probing questions and just verify the information that's on the intake and interview form. So to start out, Cheryl has 2 children, Courtney and Artis Johnson, who live with her full time. She has been divorced since 2009, and she pays all of the household expenses and provides all of her children's support. This information is coming off of page 10 of your supplemental document. It says interview notes too. Cheryl's mother, Monica Jesse, also lives with her full-time, and Cheryl provides over half the support for her. Monica's only income is from Social Security and a small amount of bank interest. She spends her Social Security benefits on her medical expenses and does not contribute to the household expenses. The taxpayer did not qualify for the premium tax credit, and taxpayer and dependents had minimal essential coverage. That's referring to that information from the module on the Affordable Care Act. If there is a refund, she wants it direct deposited, and if there's a balance due, she will pay by check. Cheryl is repaying a student loan and received a statement from the lending institution showing that she had paid $395.67 in interest last year. Cheryl's friend, Willie Cash, lost his home and moved in with her April 18th of this tax year. He does not have any income and is currently looking for work. Cheryl would like to claim Willie as a dependent. And then there is her check so that you can get the bank information off of a check and put it into the tax software. So now that we're a little more familiar and acquainted with Cheryl's situation, we're going to start the tax return. We're going to pull out her Social Security card and the cards for all the household members that are on page 9 to reference to get into the tax return. As you can see with those Social Security cards, there are 6 digits behind the first 3 numbers. Those are just digits that you can make up. So you have to do that in order to start the tax return. For our sake, we're just going to go with 0. And then as opposed to hitting, if you hit enter, it'll go to this interview section. They were supposed to take the interview section off. I don't know if they're actually going to do that with this upcoming tax season or not. But the interview is actually, it turns out to take a really long time, and if you enter information in incorrectly, it is so hard to correct. So we just go to the tax forms. It's a lot easier to work off of these tax forms, and it's a lot more efficient. So I do encourage you as you practice and go through your training to utilize that resource. When you first log in, you'll go to the main information page. This is basically all the information that's coming from that intake and interview. So I'm going to first enter, first I'm going to put on my cap locks because the IRS requests that all of these tax returns are done with cap locks on. And I think you'll find too that as you go through these examples, it's a little bit easier to read if everything's in caps as well. I think that's why the IRS also likes to see that. So you'll see that the software is really nice because there's some things in green that the software will automatically select, and then it'll highlight anything in red if you need to fill it out. This top line under mailing address is just in case anyone is deceased that you're preparing a tax return for, so you can ignore that and jump right down to present home address that's listed on the intake and interview form. Anytime it says YS or your city or your state, just use whatever you usually use. Again, these are practice, so we don't have to get down to too much of the specifics. We're more worried about content and where we're putting information. Even if a taxpayer does not indicate a phone number on the intake and interview form, we need to have some sort of contact number for the taxpayer because we have to be able to contact them if there's any sort of issue with the return. So don't forget to enter that phone number. This information over here, the foreign address information, we don't ever use. We don't use the special processing line. I've never done any sort of Puerto Rican tax return, and it's not requested and has not been requested as long as I've been with the program, so I won't worry too much about that. The next section I want to bring your attention to regards the disability section. In this specific example that we're preparing, there isn't anybody that has indicated that is disabled as far as the taxpayer or a spouse goes, but do know this is where you indicate that, and these are very easy things to miss, so I just want to point those out to you. You can ask the person if they'd like to donate any money to the presidential election fund. That's not anything that's hugely common or popular, so sometimes I skip that if we're getting backed up or if I know we've got a really long and busy day. Our filing status. So in our intake and interview notes, it's been indicated on there that Cheryl is divorced, but she is providing support for the children. So that indicates that she is the head of household. The software will automatically highlight these lines. Don't worry about that. That is one glitch in the software. I hope to have that corrected for this coming tax season software, but I can't guarantee anything. I'll only know when I see it. So we'll try to get that repaired for you so it doesn't give you any confusion, but it just asks if the qualifying person is a child that's not the dependent. I've never really had to use this in any of the tax preparation that I've done. The exemptions, those are all going to be automatically calculated by the software. So the next big part that we're at is the dependents, and I want to talk a little bit about this. So we're going to take information right from the intake and interview form. Again, if Cheryl were right in front of us, we would want to be confirming this information and making sure that it's correct. The one thing that I do want to talk about, though, in a little bit of detail is the situation with Willie Cash. So if you look on the intake and interview form on page 7, it indicates that Willie is a friend, so he's not related to Cheryl. And it also indicates that he's only been in the home for 8 months. If you remember from your interview, from your training information, there can only be a dependent claimed that's a non-relative if they've been in the home for 12 months. So Cheryl actually cannot claim him legally on this tax return. Once you explain that to the taxpayer, they are usually agreeable and understand that that's how you have to prepare the return. If they're insistent that you put the person on the return, you can ask them to leave and to go to a paid preparer because we're not knowingly going to do something incorrectly. So for our purposes, we're just going through and entering this information. We've indicated that Artis is actually Cheryl's son. He's been in the home for 12 months, so you'll see these drop-down menus come along. The code, it'll offer you a drop-down menu, so it makes more sense. So Artis is Cheryl's son, so we're going to go ahead and indicate that he's a dependent. Because she provides all of his support and he's under 19, we can go ahead and select the earned income tax credit. Because these are basically, these are those tax credits. So the child tax credit will automatically calculate from the software based on the dependent's age. But the earned income tax credit, you'll have to check, and that's what the EIC stands for. If the client is eligible for a dependent care credit, then you'll go ahead and check that box too. But because of the age, Artis and Courtney are not eligible for that, so that's not anything we're going to be working with on this tax return. Again, we're just entering this information. The TaxWise software is doing some of the calculations, which is really nice. Courtney is a daughter. She's been in the home for 12 months. There's a child that lives with. That just came up because I went to check the box and the software was going to do it. So we're entering Cheryl's mother, and because of her age and dependency situation, Monica's actually not eligible to be a dependent for the earned income tax credit. If you go through all of your supplements, there's an option for parent down at the bottom, so this is an alphabetical list. She's been in the home all year, and she is not a child, so she's an other dependent. So we're going to check that 3. And so there's nothing we have to check off here because of the situation. Obviously, she's not going to be eligible for the child tax credit or the dependent tax credit and dependent care credit. And then we went through our decision tree for the earned income tax credit and determined that Monica is not eligible as a dependent for the earned income tax credit. All this information is automatically input through the software. If you do have a resident that's moved states, you'll have to indicate what states they lived in. So instead of having a full year resident in Michigan, you'll have to input the states that they lived in. I'm assuming Michigan will be one since they're here. There's nothing we do with this bank information until we get to this next section where it says bank account information. So there's different things that are sponsored by the IRS, like the money clip prepaid Visa. We don't work with that, so we're just going to go right to the bank account information. I enter this information from the page where the check is listed, so on page 10. And you want to take the numbers that are right at the bottom of the check. So the routing number is listed first, and then the account number is right by it. Again, this information is automatically calculated. It's automatically in the TaxWise template. There's nothing you have to do there. And then you need to start filling stuff out again. So at this taxpayer's PIN, what we're doing down here is we're authorizing the e-file. So each year somebody files a tax return, they have to have what's called an e-file PIN, and it's any random 5 numbers. So what we do as a program is we always say that it's the taxpayer's zip code, and that's so that if they come to us and ask us what PIN we use, we can just let them know, hey, you used your zip code from the previous tax year, wherever you lived and filed from. So that's a good point of reference. And then we're authorizing the e-file. That's it. So the next page we're going to go to is the next page that's highlighted red over here in our forms tree. So we're going to go to this 1040 ACA worksheet. As indicated in the intake and interview area, Cheryl had a basic minimal essential coverage for everyone. So we're indicating that there was full health care coverage all year, and it's that easy of just checking full right down the line for all household members. And that's referencing that module on the Affordable Care Act and how you complete those returns. So about 90% of the tax returns that we see They have just minimal essential coverage and there's not a whole lot you need to do. So all this information, we jumped over here to the 1040, page 1. All this information flows from the main information page and carries right through the tax return. So we're jumping right into the income section. As you go through the supplemental material that you printed out to work on this return, you're going to want to take a look at page 11, where it has the 2 sources of income that show receipts. So we've got her W-2 listed and her unemployment. W-2 is listed under wages. It's a form of a wage. It's the first line. So we're going to go over here. Notice that anything that you hover over on any line will have an arrow to the right of it. If you click on the arrow, it's going to give you 3 options. This top option just explains what line it is. This option we'll talk about a little bit later, but this is really what you're going to be accessing. It's called Link to Another Form. So it basically links one line to the form that has the material with the information on it. So we're going to pull up a W-2, and I'm looking at page 11 of that supplemental document because that's the W-2 that I'm going to access to get information from. First, you'll want to indicate if it's for the taxpayer or the spouse. It's obviously the taxpayer in this case. You'll see Cheryl's name and social security number and address flow right over from that main information sheet. The first thing that the tax software wants you to identify is if this is the address that's still on the W-2. So sometimes because people move, they might have a W-2 with a different address than what's on their main information page. If that's the case, you would select this box where it says check and make changes to the U.S. address. If you do that, you'll see that these lines highlight blue now. And if they're blue, it just shows that you can edit the information that's on them. But because it's the same address, we're just going to check this box where it says check if this is the taxpayer's address shown on the W-2. If you scroll down, you'll see first the employer identification number. If you enter an identification number, a lot of the time the form will automatically fill in the employer's name. However, because these are examples and we're using different employers than what we typically do, they're probably not going to come up for you automatically. So it is a little more tedious and requires a little more entering of information doing these practice returns. The tax software does not like any special characters, so no periods, no dollar signs, nothing like that. If you do that, then a lot of the time there will be some issues with the return, so don't even bother abbreviating anything or doing anything like that. It's okay. And then you'll see that if you put in a zip code, the city will follow. So as you can see, I'm just going to enter the information from box 1 on the page 11 on the W-2. You just take the information in box 1 and put it in box 1. You'll take the information in box 2 and put it in box 2. It's that easy. Also, this information will automatically calculate based on just how the calculation works. So don't be alarmed when it automatically calculates. Also, you'll notice I'm not putting in any decimal points. Again, that's considered a special character. The program does round, so go ahead and round any numbers. As you can see, this information already does not match up with what's on the W-2 that we're getting our information from. What I first recommend doing is filling out the W-2 completely, so making sure to fill in boxes 11 and 12, and then go back through the return and address anything that doesn't look correct. That's because once you enter the information in this box 12, a lot of the time it will change these numbers. And so once everything is in the software, then that's when you want to look and see if there's anything you need to change. So you'll see first the box 1 matches box 1 on the W-2 on page 11. So that's good. And box 3 and 5 now look correct. However, box 4 does not look correct. So we'll want to make sure we go through and edit that and that matches up to what's on the W-2 in front of us. So to take all these automatic calculations off, you'll just check this box that indicates check to take calculations off of lines 3, 4, 5, and 6. Then you'll just put in the information that's on the W-2 to make sure that the W-2 in front of you matches what's on the software. We'll go here. This is where the state information is entered on line 15, so we'll enter Michigan. And then we'll put in our state tax withholding. If you go on page 14, that's where the information for the state training is listed. So if you look at page 14 in your supplemental document material, it shows that that Cheryl lives in Lansing, actually. It shows that Cheryl lives in Muskegon, and we're going to go ahead and just show the amount of tax paid. So it says, last year, Washington Associates deducted $343.75, so $344 from Cheryl's wages for city income tax. So then we're just going to write in the locality. We indicated that Cheryl works and lives in Muskegon, so we'll just type out Muskegon right here. And that is the W-2. So we'll scroll up. We just want to verify that our information on the W-2 is what we've just typed into the tax software. It is, so we'll check this box that says please verify federal withholdings, Social Security withholdings, and Medicare withholdings. And then we're going to go back to our 1040 page 1 because that's where we're always going to go. We want to make sure that our income showed up, and there it is. And now we're going to go down and enter that unemployment income. So right here is the unemployment line. Again, if you're not sure, it takes a little bit to get used to how the page is set up and where things are located. Make sure that if you can't immediately find a line that you're looking for or a source of income, that you still stay within this income section. So we're going to go over to this line 19 and enter a unemployment form. So it's called a 1099-G. You can see that on page 11. It says Form 1099-G right on it. But if you're still not sure, it says right on it that it's it's unemployment compensation. It says that in box 1. So you know you're looking for an unemployment form. Right behind 1099-G it says unemployment. So that's how you know. It always has the name with it. So we indicate that it's the taxpayer's unemployment. It asks for the payer's name. So again, we're getting this right off of that 1099-G form. We're getting that number right off the form too. So unemployment benefits received, that's in box 1 of that form. So we see it's $2,400. And the only other thing on that form is indicating that there was a federal withholding of $240. So we're going to put that in. And that is it. So again, we're going to go back to our 1040 page 1 and make sure that all of our income showed up like it should have. There's our wages. And right there's that unemployment. Now you'll see this box up here. It's asking you to answer this. It's going to ask if the person itemized last year. Most of the time people either itemize every year or they don't itemize every year. So just ask the taxpayer. A lot of the time you'll know from the intake and interview form, the page 2, they don't indicate any yeses in the sections in the middle and towards the bottom, then they're likely not going to have any sort of advantage to itemize. But it's always good to have that question about itemization with the tax client. So we're selecting no because we know in this example we are not itemizing. And then we're going to go down to adjustment. So if you remember during that intake and interview section and where they gave more information about the tax client's situation, it indicates right in there that Cheryl had some student loan interest. So we're going to take a look over here and try to find our student loan interest. It's right here on line 33. Again, just like with entering any income information, you'll look at the arrow and open the form that you can enter the information on. Right here it says student loan on 1040 worksheet 2. We'll just enter that student loan interest that she paid. A lot of the time, like I said, there's a 1098-T with 1098-TE, and it provides the information on any of the interest that the student has paid. So we see here that it's $396. We're going to go back to our page 1 and just confirm and make sure that everything's carried over. So we can see all of our income is listed right here, the total income. And in fact, our student loan interest did show up, so that's listed right here. So we'll take our total income, we'll subtract income. Over here on page 2, because of all the information so listed up here, it's going to be most advantageous for the taxpayer if they take the standard deduction amount. So for the head of household, it's going to be this $9,100. So $9,100 is applied to the adjusted gross income, and that reduces the taxable income to this amount. After you have that amount, the exemptions are applied. So with the 4 people in the family, this is the exemption amount. And again, that's applied to the taxable income. And then we're left with this amount as taxable income. And based on that taxable income, this is the amount that the IRS wants to receive in taxes and tax credits. So if we go down here, we'll see that under the non-refundable credits, the child tax credit has already calculated the $1,233 that reduces this taxable income to 0. So as we look at it now, Cheryl does not owe any tax. But what she does do is she gets a refund. So we're going to go down here to my favorite section to take a look at. First, there's this amount. This is the $1,266 that she had withheld from her pay, and so she gets that all refunded back to her. There's also this earned income tax credit, so that's when we want to go over to our earned income tax credit worksheets that are lit up and take a look at those. The EIC sheet is already good to go. This is the worksheet, and it's just going through some questions to verify and make sure that the dependents are dependents that Cheryl can actually claim. So the first question they ask is, does the taxpayer have a social security number that allows him or her to work in the U.S. and is valid for earned income tax purposes? Yes, Cheryl does have a social security card. We just saw that. We know that that's true. Was the taxpayer a non-resident alien for any part of the year? No. We know that Cheryl was in the U.S. all year and is a natural-born citizen. Could the taxpayer be a qualifying child of another person? No. Cheryl, in fact, supports her mother, so that's impossible. So down here, again, the red marks just indicate they want an answer. Both children were not married. Both children lived in the U.S. for more than half the year. And both children are not going to be claimed on any other tax return. So we're going to mark those. And both children have a social security number. This last question is just asking if the taxpayer has ever had any issues with the earned income tax credit. If they have, then we just select yes here. If they haven't, which is, I've never had one person indicate yes, but it could come up. So don't just skip the question, but you'll more than likely select no. And then you'll see down here, there's the earned income tax credit. So this form is going to highlight, and that's just because they'll see this little caution sign. Don't worry about that. That's okay. Before we go back to our page 2, we'll just want to look down our forms tree. It looks like this 8880 form is highlighted. Let's take a look here. This is for that qualified retirement savings contribution credit. So again, to be qualified for this credit, they just cannot be a student. So Cheryl's not a student, so we indicate no, and that creates a small little credit, but it's nice. It's money, and it does the same thing. So we're going to go back up to this 1040, page 2, and take a look here, and you'll see that retirement credit is now present. So between the withholdings and the tax credits, it looks like Cheryl's got a refund coming her way. This is the total amount to be refunded. If a client did owe, it would be listed down here under amount owed on line 78. But it's great that she is getting a refund, so we're going to put in her bank information. And we're just going to indicate that it's a checking account. And that is it for the federal side. So now we just have to jump and do the state and city. This prep use form, don't worry about. We have to get some surveys filled out, but we'll have a volunteer that's in charge of just the surveys. So just leave that as it is. It's not going to impact the return in any way. So we know we're starting to see the Michigan information because Michigan is listed right here in the forms tree. The actual tax return itself is not complicated at all. The first page is just some basic information that flows over from the federal tax return. The only thing that you have to enter is the school district code. So you'll have a folder when you start your volunteering that provides all these different codes and some bank information in case people forget it. We have routing numbers. It's got a lot of information that you'll reference, but the school district codes will be in that. If it's a credit-only return, there's plenty of examples with the credit-only, and I want to make sure that you really understand those because we do get several clients, depending on the tax site, that come in to do the credit-only. So that is something we'll see a whole lot, but for the purposes of our training and going through a complete return, we're not really going to talk a whole lot about credit-only returns. Cheryl Berringer has earned income, so we're just going to complete the return as if she were a client at the tax site. The state campaign fund, again, you can ask a client if they'd like to donate. If you're in a rush, I wouldn't even mess with it. The farmers and fishermen, seafarers, we don't get a lot of those at our tax site, so I wouldn't worry about that. Basically, page 1 is all set after you put the school district code in. Page 2, we're basically just indicating that there's no use tax. Again, from our module, use tax is when somebody buys a lot of things on the internet, and then they have to pay taxes to other states. I think even if people do buy things on the internet, right now there's not a formal way that any of the Treasury departments are tracking that. I've never had one client in the 4 years I've been working on this that has ever indicated that, yeah, I do a lot of online shopping and I'd love to pay some taxes to other states on it. So I would just indicate that there's no use tax in this home. And then down here, you'll definitely want to electronically file this return. And then you'll have a couple of options. So a lot of the time you'll just want to indicate that the tax return is going to the same bank account as the federal return. If for some reason you have any issues with using that option, which I have had issues with this in the past, it's the only reason I bring it up, you can select this option. Check here if you want the state refund deposited into a different bank account. Even though you select that, you have to put bank account information in. So just enter the same bank account information and it'll go right to that bank account. I've never had any issues with that. And then you'll again want to enter the information so that for the e-file only section for the bank information. And then you'll scroll down and that's it. Now we just have to do our final couple parts. So first we'll want to check on this property tax credit. It shows in your page 14 with your Michigan information. There's a few things I want to review as far as the Michigan property tax credit goes. It's not going to highlight. It's on this page, Michigan credit, page 1. But the form's not going to highlight automatically because the software doesn't have any way to identify if the client is eligible until we put in their housing information. So a lot of the information from the federal return or that you've already entered on the state return is going to flow over to the top part of the Michigan credit form. And the first thing it's going to ask about is if somebody's a farmer, if they have property taxes. Because Cheryl's not a homeowner, because she's renting, we don't have to fill anything in over here. There is a line for renters, but that's going to flow from the last part of the return. So the first thing we want to address is entering any of the non-taxable income into the household resources. So the state of Michigan, just to kind of recap the module and explain this again, the state of Michigan wants the household resources. So all taxable and non-taxable income need to be accounted for in the home. This includes income from dependents too. So just keep in mind that we've already got our income coming over from the federal side. It says here on page 14 of the additional interview information for Cheryl that she rented a home for $950. She did bring her heating bill, so we have that information. One piece of information that I would have added to this is how much Social Security that Cheryl's mother receives, because technically that should go on here. So for all tax returns that you prepare, just make sure that you enter the Social Security for all household members. For this example, because it's not listed anywhere, I'm going to skip over that. But it does say that Cheryl did receive $600 for 3 months of child support. So we do have that income amount, and we want to put that in. So child support is right here on line 22. Again, I like to explain where all these numbers are coming from. So I just select to put it on what's called a scratch pad. This is the only time you'll use scratch pads in the whole software is on this Michigan return. So people often want to use scratch pads for things. Don't worry about it. The scratch pad's not a good way to go for entering information. It's kind of the last resort thing, and that's because a lot of the time there's forms that have to be attached. So I'm going to call this child support, and I'm going to indicate that it was $600. Again, there's no special characters for Feb, for April, and for May. And so that's $1,800 right there. So we're first going to stop at page 1 and make sure that that child support shows up for household resources. And there it is. So then next on page 2, all of the adjustments just carry over. That's about the only thing that's on page 2 right now. After the credit is calculated, you can go through and the property tax credit will be right here on line 44, so you can see how much the credit itself is worth. But the only thing that you'll have to do is you might want to check with the taxpayer to see if they have any out-of-pocket medical premiums they pay. For example, a lot of our senior citizens have premiums that they pay. It might be $150 a month. You can multiply that by 12 and put that as an adjustment over here on the state side. Also, you can count any medical premiums. If somebody has a, just like I said in the state training module, if somebody had any any insurance that they paid on their car, as long as it was full coverage, the state will automatically accept a standard $130 for the insurance coverage on this line. There's nothing in our interview notes that indicate this, so we're not even going to look at it. And we're just going to go to page 3, which is where you enter rental information. So for renters, we know the address of the place that Cheryl lives, so we're going to enter that. The notes indicate that I should just count myself as the landlord. It doesn't indicate otherwise that there was any other place that Cheryl rented, so we're going to assume that she was at the unit for 12 months. And then we enter the monthly rent, and the tax software calculates the total rent paid. It also calculates then the credit that the client's eligible for. So this all highlights green, and you can go to page 2 now and see that there is in fact a property tax credit that's generated. We're going to go over here on page 2 of our 1040 and confirm that the property tax credit flows over, and it does. And then lastly, for the state return side, we're going to just verify, since Cheryl brought in her home heating credit information, we're going to put that in and see if Cheryl's qualified for that. So on your page, it's on Michigan Credit 7 is where you can locate the home heating credit. We're going to start on page 1. You'll see it says home heating credit claim. The information again is flowing from that federal return. Muskegon is county code 61. This information will be filled out, and then all you'll have to do for the credit itself is answer these questions that are highlighted in red. So does the client own or rent the home? Yes, Cheryl does rent. Are the heating costs currently included? No, they're not. Do you want your name and address referred to other government assistance programs for which you qualify? I haven't really seen a whole lot of any sort of um, mailings or heard of anything that's come from this question, so I'm not sure why it's still asked. But I always ask the client, and they usually just say no. And then there's no SSI being received that we know of. And lastly, it asks how much you are billed. So this is the big thing that we need from that bill that the clients bring in. As it says on that page 14 of our information regarding the client, Cheryl had paid $1,147. So once we put that in, it's not highlighting green. The client probably is not eligible at this point for the home heating credit. To confirm, if we go on page 2, it shows how the credit's calculated. So over here, it shows all of the household resources, which is this amount. And then the client is only eligible for the home heating credit based on how many people are in the home if they earn under this amount of money. So it's getting harder and harder to receive a home heating credit. Most people are not qualified. It's only for extremely low income tax filers. So a lot of the time you won't even see a home heating credit unless the taxpayer is filing a credit only return. So that is it on the home heating credit, and that is it on the Michigan tax return. Like I said, I always like to go back to the 1040 returns, make sure that all the information looks correct to me. You can look over here and find the refund amount. So there's that property tax credit that shows up. This is the Michigan portion of the earned income tax credit. So you'll see that this is the federal amount. The state provides 6% of the federal amount as a state Michigan earned income tax credit. And then we have the taxes withheld from the employer. So this is the total amount of the taxes that were withheld, but because of how much tax Cheryl owes, this amount, she only receives the difference, which is this. But at least it's a refund, and it's pretty common for people to get a refund on the federal, but not necessarily on the state. We definitely want to electronically file the return. If somebody doesn't, you can always switch what this says, but typically people just want to electronically file. So that's it for the state return. Lastly, we just have a little bit of the city information to go through. Again, this isn't going to highlight necessarily because we have to input the information. But the Michigan city returns are located on what's called the Michigan Common Form City Form. So you'll see right here it says Michigan CF, page 1. If for some reason it's not showing up, you can add it. You can add any form to this tree. If you just hit add, you can just write CF for common form and it pops right up. So I'm right here in the city's form. We've identified that Cheryl works and lives in the city of Muskegon. So we know from our training that if she's worked here and lived here, she has to pay 1% of her income. She's been a resident at the same location all of the tax year. Filing status carries over. You'll see the information comes right off of the tax return, so there's not a whole lot of guesswork or calculations you have to do. You can see here that that's the total taxable income. Her exemptions are applied to reduce her taxable income to that amount. 1% of $32,829 is $328. She had $344 withheld. This is flowing right from that W-2 form. So if you take the difference between the two, she receives because she overpaid, she'll receive a refund of $16 from the city. We'll have this direct deposited. While we can have all this information filled out for the taxpayer, the cities still do not accept electronic filing of the city tax returns. So you want to make sure that you explain to the client that they have to mail this document in. We'll enter one last time the bank account information for the taxpayer. Indicate that that's a checking account. On page 2, it's just, again, entering a lot of the information right from the tax return regarding exemptions, but it does want you to fill out something here at the bottom. If it's for the taxpayer and they have moved around a little bit, you'll want to write all of the addresses and when they were located in each address from what time. Because Cheryl didn't move at all, you can just type in same and indicate that she was at that location all year. And no person is ever allowed to discuss any sort of income tax situation, so you'll always select no here. And that is it for the city. So that's the total tax return. Once you're finished and you've looked through and reviewed everything, everything looks good to you, you'll hit this button, Run Diagnostic. You'll find that the program doesn't find any errors, or if it does, it'll tell you exactly where the error is. You'll want to go back and fix it. After this point in the tax return, you'll go ahead and call over the site coordinator or another tax preparer, and they can complete a quality review. They'll go through all the quality review functions and that list that's on the intake and interview form, and then they'll also confer with the taxpayer and make sure that there's no other questions to be answered. You'll print out the tax return. You'll print out an extra copy for the city so that the client can mail that in, because that's the one thing that they have to mail in themselves. And then you'll print it out for them, ask them if they have any questions, provide the refund information, so in case they want to track their refund, and then ask them to come back. And that's it. You're all done with the tax return. So those are the nuts and bolts, and this is one of the basic returns that we're going to do. I do have two other examples of some much more complicated tax returns, so be sure to stick around for those or to watch the next module when you're able regarding the other tax situations. Thanks for joining me today, and as always, if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Thanks!